Good morning, everyone. Glad that you're tuning in this morning or whenever you're tuning in. We're recording this in the morning of December 4th, 2020. It's a Friday. And what I'm about to say today is a little bit, it could be controversial. However, whatever controversy there is, what we need to remember is what drives us is not opinion-based, but it's biblically based. And we need to live in a way where we're living theologically sound with the words of God that we have in our Bible. And what I'm going to talk about today is the church. What is the church? And why does that matter so much? And during this time, we are going through a pandemic. Right now, there are a lot more restrictions than there were previously about staying at home and not going to work, not going to non-essential places of business, and for us to slow the spread of this coronavirus. Just spoke to my brother-in-law this morning, and he told me that the numbers have risen at Orange Coast Memorial by a huge amount, and that should have us concerned. But then there's a lot of concern about church. Should we reopen? Should we not? If we win a legal battle, should we go ahead and reopen or should we not? And the answer to that needs to go back not on our rights as what we can or cannot do. We could do a lot of things, and just because we can do things doesn't mean we should. I mean, just because I could, get a staple gun and shoot my hand in the hand or shoot myself in the hand doesn't mean it's a good thing to do. And the reason why I say that is because what drives us shouldn't be even our logic. It shouldn't even be our emotion. It shouldn't be even our rights. But what should drive us is our theology. And when we go to the church, we have to ask the question, what is the church? When most people hear of a church, they probably think of a building. And we have a building here at our church. I'm recording in one of the rooms here, and we have a green screen set up, some lights, camera, and very minimal amount of people in here. There's 3 total. And everyone's wearing masks, except me. But when we think of a church, we think of a nice building or a fancy building or a place where believers gather. When I was over in Europe, we saw huge churches, Catholic churches that were ornate, ornate, really nicely designed. Took 3 generations to build, and you could even see the time periods within the structure and how it's changed through that 100 years, where father, son, and grandson took time to build that church and design and decorate that church. And in some places, when I was over in Africa, churches were very simple. It was just a roof over someone's head. I remember one time when I was over there and it was raining, and everyone just came in under the roof, and you could hear the rain dropping on the metal roof, and it was hard to hear the sermon, but people came together, they worshiped God, the word was preached, and that's how they did church over there. But biblically speaking, if we look back into the Bible that you and I have in our hands on a regular basis, or at least that's the pastor's dream, is that the church is more than a building. In fact, some people will say the church is not a building at all, but it's about the people. And the area of theology that seeks to understand the aspects of church is called ecclesiology. Ecclesiology, this is a word that talks about what church is. And we need to look back to ecclesiology and look at a few things. There are a number of aspects that we have to look at, and it's defining why we live and why we do church the way we do church, and if we need to alter it and change it. And so we need to look at its nature, the purpose, the biblical image of the church, and then emphasizing the essential truth. So the first thing is, what is the Christian church? What is the Christian church? The early Christians didn't have a church building. Not in the sense that we have right now where we come together and have all sorts of functions. The first century churches were usually, based with people, Christians, who were persecuted on a regular basis, and as a result, they met in homes. They didn't meet in buildings. And as Christianity spread and became more influential, buildings were dedicated to worship. And they were established and became what we know today as what churches are. But in this sense, the church consists of people, but not of buildings. Fellowship, worship, and ministry were all conducted by people and not buildings. Church structures facilitate the role of God's people, but they do not fulfill it. Let me read that again. Church structures facilitate the role of God's people, but they do not fulfill it. And then we have the next question is, what is the visible and invisible church? Well, the visible church are the buildings that we see, made up of all sorts of people. But the invisible church we see is a church that everyone believes in the same thing. The few foundational things, we believe in the Trinity, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, and we believe that we need to believe in him. We will not perish, but then also that we have to share this message to others as well, too. The invisible church is a church made up of God's people. The visible church is a church that's not always perfect and not always made up of God's people, because there's people who come in and out of this visible church. Let's go to the function of the church. What does the church do? Like I said, the church is not a building, but of a body of believers with specific nature and purpose. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, before this pandemic hit, what was our role in our community and what was our role in society at large? Have we been the church, or have we been playing country club? And that's kind of harsh, but yet it's kind of true. When we really ask certain questions about why we exist, then we come to the core of who we are, what we are about, and maybe some changes that we need to have. So any key to being a church, there are three things that I see that are foundational. 1, worship. 2, edification. 3, evangelism. Just these three things. Are we doing these things as a church now, before, and what we're going to be doing in the future? So worship is what? God-centered, Christ-centered. It's not about entertaining Christians with flashy images and designs and worship necessarily, or music or presentations, but about expressing our love by worshiping our Creator. We're supposed to praise and glorify God in worship. And so every Christian needs to be part of a fellowship and be part of a worship time with God. And when we come together on Sundays, that's what we do together corporately. But then separately, when we're at our own homes, we're supposed to worship God daily throughout the whole day. The second thing is edification. The role of the church is to edify believers, to nurture, to build them up, to mature them. And sometimes we just go through a list of things that we want them to listen to. We may not necessarily do what needs to be done, but we're supposed to edify everyone and to continue to educate people about God. Not just going through books, not just teaching a few things and entertaining people, but to really edify and push people. And this is what we're doing here. These videos here are to push us to the next level when it comes to our faith, and to ask the hard questions, not just simply entertain. Someone not too long ago had said to me, he goes, "Hey, Pastor Peter, the kids need to have more fun at church." And I would say, yeah, that'd be great, but my primary role here is to edify, to teach, to grow. People want to learn, come to church. Learn from me. Come near me. If you want to have fun, go to Disneyland. Well, at this time, you can't go to Disneyland, so just stay home. The next thing we're supposed to do with our church, and what we're supposed to be about, our foundation, is evangelism, sharing with the lost the love of Jesus Christ. And those are the three major things: worship, edification, and evangelism. That is the role of the church. But when we go out and share the lost to other people, it's not just throwing out gospel tracts and just talking to people and stopping people at supermarkets and say, "Hey, you want to believe in Jesus?" And they're holding, during summertime, they're holding 2 bags of ice cream, and you're holding them back for like 10, 15 minutes just to share the gospel presentation. That's one aspect of it. Not annoying people, but to share the gospel through gospel tracts, but then to share life, to meet people physically before you meet them spiritually. That's the goal of the church. And we've done that here, where we've passed out food. Great stuff. But we need to think even further. What is our role? So if the church fails to fulfill any of these key roles, worship, edification, evangelism, then the church isn't functioning according to the way God intended. And so as we look at this, as we look at the church, we need to realize it's not about the building. And so whether or not we meet together or not, we could still do what the church is supposed to do. But the most important thing is we have to learn about what the church is. It's not the building. It's not meeting inside. The most important thing about the church is the church being the church. As you can see, there's an image that I requested the team to put on. It says the church has left the building, which is so right at this moment, because when we're not allowed to come together in large numbers indoors, we could do it outdoors according to the laws as it currently stands right now. We may have left the building, but our function hasn't changed. Our mission hasn't changed. Our responsibility hasn't changed. The question for us is, and I think it makes it so much clearer now that we're in a pandemic, was that whatever we did before is just multiplied now. And I think our desires to go back to what was normal is looking into the past, but not looking into the future. The new normal simply means for us to use more innovative ways to do those three things? How do we worship in a new fashion? How do we edify our believers in our church in a new way? How do we share the gospel in a new way? When we get back to some sort of normalcy, the nice thing is this: we have our old ways of doing things combined with our new ways of doing things, which just maximizes the effectiveness of the church. Instead of trying to figure out how we could do things the old way at this moment, let's try to figure out ways we could do new things. Evangelism, for example. I mean, in the past, most people wouldn't come into a church if you would invite them. But now, you could just tell someone, hey, I'm staying at home. You're staying at home. But I'm still going to church. You want to join in? And people would more readily watch a video of a worship service than attend one. Case in point, as a Christian, how many of you would actually go into a Buddhist temple or a mosque to worship with your friends? Well, first of all, how many of you have friends that are from different religions than you? And second of all, if they invited you to go to these places, would you go? Your first reaction would be, no, I'm not interested. No, I can't. I'm a Christian. I can't do these kind of things. Well, think with me then. Why would they be interested in going to church if you are not interested in going to temple? The same kind of pull, the same kind of pressure. But if God is working in their hearts through you, being a friend, being a helper, being a person who's walked alongside them through thick and thin, and when you tell them, I find joy and comfort in knowing that Jesus Christ died for my sins and I have no fear of the future. Yes, careful, but no fear. I have hope and I have joy. I want you to have the same thing. And they may not respond right away, but as we continue to ask them, as they continue to see who we are and what we're about, then they may be interested. And that's evangelism that will allow us to walk beside people rather than just going out and giving little pamphlets. So my friends, during this time, as our church is transitioning and trying new things, give us feedback. Help out. Be part of it. Be the church rather than being a critic of the church. Join in with the worship service instead of criticizing for not having certain things. Give us some input, but also be ready to help. When it comes to edifying, what are you doing to learn and be part of God's family during this time? What is your role right now in sharing that with others? And when it comes to evangelism, what are you personally doing right now to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, rather than expecting the evangelism team to do whatever it is that they do? So my friends, be the church. Be the church. And the church has left the building.